thank you everyone for taking part of the webinar. So I'm going to go through a very brief 7 or 8 page PowerPoint on a program that can, for qualifying properties, help you uncover typically a 6-figure amount of money at a cost of capital of 0. So it's basically free money to be used for improvements and upgrades. And as we all know, improvements and upgrades generally have a pretty big impact on same-store sales. And as we emerge from this very difficult time, being able to get the most out of your location is going to be a very, very big deal. So can we go to the next slide, please, Eric? Okay. So really simply, I'm going to give you some background, then we'll get into a quick example, and that's pretty much what the whole presentation will be, and the example is very brief as well. But the Lease Capital Program is a unique and targeted process, and is designed for restaurant operations to access additional capital, which is embedded in your current lease terms. And it's basically by aligning your interest with the landlord's interest, which is actually a surprisingly simple thing to do. It's a win-win solution for both parties. So given there is a continued demand for, even in these difficult times, there continues to be a high demand for triple net leases in the commercial real estate market. And that large demand continues to create opportunities for capital events, which the Lease Capital Program is one of. So the program provides a low-risk way to access the value when you renew a long-term lease on a core location, and the program is based on a early proactive content with the existing landlord to identify any value creation opportunities. So the program is it's a win-win scenario for both the landlord and the tenant. And as I said before, it's all about aligning everyone's interests mutually. Typically, for qualifying properties, you're looking at monetary results of up to 6 figures. Reduces risk, and it's a 0% cost of capital. So it's free money to reinvest in the property for improvements and upgrades. And from our standpoint, it is all success fee based. So the only commitment is a little bit of time. Next slide, please. All right, so we'll give you a profile. So from a restaurant standpoint, whether it's an owner-operator, a franchisee, or a franchisor, they all make sense. This only works for leases. So the ownership type must be a leasehold. Lease structure would be a triple net lease, and that's a lease structure where the business owners also is paying rent. Paying separate from rent, is paying utilities and property tax separately. So if you qualify from a lease triple net standpoint, then you're going to make sense. From a time standpoint, I would say at least 6 months prior to a lease expiring is the best time. So at least 6 months and up to 5 years is a good time to explore this. If you have less than 6 months, the timing's a little tight and it might be too difficult to execute. And then from a standpoint, many leases have options. So typically we're going to find at least 2 options remaining. That's not required, but it is ideal. From a premises configuration, what we like are either freestanding locations or pad sites, and obviously this restaurants and then other property types that qualify would be automotive, convenience stores, drugstores, bank branches. But in this case, obviously we're going to be focusing on restaurants, which are either freestanding or pad site locations. And from an operational risk standpoint, depending upon the number of properties, when we go through is we rank the attractiveness of this program on a property by property basis. And what we often do with the business owner is overlay metrics such as rent to revenue if there are multiple properties involved to figure out the best way to prioritize next steps. So next slide, please. And here we're going to get into, this is the fun part, we're going to get into an actual example. So this is how a business owner is able to get about $220,000 for improvements and upgrades to put back into a building. So an owner-operator has 3 years remaining on the current lease with 2 5-year options remaining. And they may or may not have the options, but in this case, it's ideal that they do. The annual triple net rent is $175,000. So typically, from a rent standpoint, landlords, they like to have at least 10 years of term out there. So when we get down to 3, the value of that property starts to decrease. So that equates to a 9% cap rate. And again, that is due to the shorter term. So to value this property, what you would do is you would take the triple net rent of $175,000 divided by the cap rate of 0.09, and that's going to come out with a property value of approximately $1.9 million. At the same time, the restaurant owner, he or she looks around, determines that this location's needing about $175,000 in improvements. So while all that's going on, we also have, while all that's going on, you have a landlord, and typically he or she is kind of looking at this from the other way, where it's like, yeah, I would love to, have your 3-year lease turn into a 10-year lease, but if you're the business owner, if you're always doing 10-year leases, it's going to rob you of your negotiating capabilities. So, in most cases, it always makes sense to not make big commitments to the landlord, because the advantage would only go to the landlord, because it would increase the value of the property for the landlord and the landlord only. But in this case, we put together a really nice case study, and we go back and we approach the landlord and we say, hey, Mr. Mrs. Landlord, if so-and-so restaurant were to, and now we're under the outcome section, sign an additional 7 years, that would likely decrease the cap rate to 7%. If you take that $175,000 divided by 0.07, that's now about $2.5 million. So the difference between 2.5 million and 1.9 is about 550,000 in value that's been created. So what if the restaurant owner is willing to make that commitment, sign that long-term lease, but I want to, I know, and this is the interesting thing by it all being quantified, I know that we're going to be able to deliver at least $500,000 in increased value. I would like 40% of that, so that'd be about $220,000. It's a great win-win scenario. So at the end of this, so by aligning everyone's interests the right way, the landlord's working, and that is typically a liquidity event that is through refining the property. So the landlord's walking away with a couple $100,000. The business owner's walking away with $220,000 to be used for improvements and upgrades. And it's literally that simple. Next slide, please. Okay, so here are just some of the benefits. Again, so if a property qualifies, typically looking at $100,000 to $400,000, again with a cost of capital of 0%, which is free money. So typically the proceeds can pay for between 30% to 100% of upgrade cost. And this is the best part. Everyone benefits. The tenant is the primary beneficiary, because he or she can look around and say, wow, I was able to improve this place for next to nothing, and same store sales have increased. So the tenant's the primary beneficiary. But the nice thing about this is we've also aligned the landlord's interest, and that enables us, without the landlord's participation, it's not going to work. So everyone has to have some skin in the game and some benefit. So the benefit to the tenant, again, are creative use of options to create monetary value with a low cost of capital, reduce operational risk on a top performing location. From our standpoint, this is success fee driven. So if we can't structure the deal, if we don't get results, we don't get paid. And again, it's all about a cooperative relationship between the tenant and the landlord. Typically to get going, all that's required on our end is a lease expiration schedule. And then what we also ask for is revenue by location if there are multiple locations. And that is really all we need to do. We're able to put together a pretty exhaustive analysis, property by property, or if it's case one property, we'll put an exhaustive analysis on one property. That's all done free of charge. We don't get a dime until we actually execute. Next slide, please. And this is the contact information. So I'm Tom Duffy. I'm there at the top, and then Glenn Blumenthal works on this with me as well. And that literally is our 6-page presentation.
Thank you, Tom. That was great. Julia, I don't know if you have any questions, or whomever's on the phone. If anybody has any questions, please, you can unmute your line and ask the questions, or use the chat feature. You do have Tom and Glenn's contact information listed up here, so that if you feel like it's a more personal, one-on-one kind of conversation you have, please feel free to reach out to them. We will we'll be making this presentation available as a recording, and we'll be putting it up on our website, if that's all right with you, Tom, for others to view and be able to get in touch with you if they weren't able to make the presentation today. Is that okay, Tom?
Fair enough. Yep, fair enough.
Okay.
Fair enough. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for presenting this information. It doesn't look like we have any questions, but I appreciate you taking the time to deliver this to our group and to let us record it and present it, let us be able to send it out to our members to review, possibly at a later time when they're looking at their businesses and seeing how they want to proceed forward.
Great.
Great. And with that, if we don't have any other questions, I think this would conclude our webinar. Thanks for taking the time and putting this together, Tom. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
All righty. Thanks. Everybody have a great day.